Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Paws for My Tail podcast. I'm your host, Shepherd the Leopard, or Shep the Snep for short. And again, we have the majestic JarggyRoo.
Hello.
The last episode was really meaningful. We talked about Jarggy's upbringing, went into different things about mental health that were really meaningful, and go watch that episode. That episode was fantastic. But with that, let's go ahead and get started where we left off. Jarggy, we were talking about how your life in high school, and prior to being in high school, you had just left a privatized Catholic school. Sounds like it was a pretty conservative upbringing, not only with your family being in the Roman Catholic Church, but then also attending that private school. How did that kind of play off for you once you got out of that school and then entered into high school?
It's a very weird transition because you're basically going from one worldview into another. I think it was during high school is when I got a more broader view of what people are outside of the Catholic faith. And I didn't really know how to deal with that at first because I just expected people to just basically come off with these kind of strict standards of how they see their teachers and how they see the world in a general sense. And I felt kind of awkward coming in because I had this idea that whenever it comes to going to classes, I had to make sure that I would put on such a proper demeanor because that's pretty much how I had to deal with during Catholic school. But no, like it was a public school when I went to high school, so it's more laid back in comparison. It's something that I never really had a chance to explore around during those first years, and then when I gotten used to it, it felt kind of good.
So what would you describe high school Jarggy like? Like, what kind of things were you starting to feel like were kind of more you rather than the more rigid version that you were kind of made to be prior to being in high school?
Well, let's just say if I were to look at high school me in the perspective of before,
Mm-hmm.
it would be such a cultural shock. It was that time when I definitely found a lot more niche interests in the realm of media and online content, and definitely in animation. I've also developed a identity of myself that I was still exploring around the time, that I wanted to be more within the alternative crowd. I wanted to get to know more of the side where people didn't really want it to live up to all of the expectations of the real world and wanted to put on a demeanor that was basically considered, for lack of a better term, like in the scene crowd or in the emo crowd, which I would consider myself at the time. That's when I developed other musical interests too, like more pop punk and rock-oriented music. I also delve into more of the extreme electronical musical genres like dubstep, which was popular on the time where I was entering my junior or senior year. But other than that, I was also exploring not a lot, but of my sexual orientation, or the lack of, which I'll explain later. It's also the time where I definitely felt like I wouldn't say much happier, but more liberating, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So emo Jarggy, did you have so when I went to, and this dates myself, but when I went to school, I don't know if we had like an emo crowd, but we had goth. I don't know if that was like different or the same for you. Um, but some of those kids were the coolest kids, in my opinion, on school, even though we weren't allowed to think they were cool because they were goth. Is that kind of the same kind of group, like the goth or the emo, or maybe in some terms, sometimes I hear like the punk crowd? Is that kind of where you feel like you fell in?
It probably was. There were probably not many differences. Well, I could be wrong, but it definitely felt like we were all one and the same in terms of like the alternative scene. But oh, I should also mention the reason why that I first got into this idea of putting on a more, I guess, edgier persona is that I was faced with a lot of like stereotypes of being Asian and being part of a culture that's outside of the Eurocentric aspect of living in the States. And I was sick and tired of it because I was basically feeling like I was put in a box of being expected to have straight A's, all because of my race, all because of my family history. And I wanted to, stray away from that. I wanted to be seen more as just a living stereotype, which it didn't really necessarily help because I think around that time is when a lot of movies and TV shows didn't really have that a lot of progressive views of racial minorities. They're often perceived as just the butt of the joke, all because of their race, all because of um, how they are living up to the stereotypical aspects of themselves. And I was getting sick and tired of it. I really didn't want to be part of that um, for much longer. So
Hmm.
I'm like, yeah, I may be Asian, but I don't get straight A's. I don't fall under the fresh off the boat scene of not understanding English, which of course I definitely did understand it. I also felt like I also felt like I wanted to, just rebel a little bit, which is typical of when you're a teen, of
Hmm.
course. But it was fun.
Do you notice that quite a bit, especially with strangers or people that you're making your acquaintance freshly, that they have kind of a stereotype towards what your race should be like? And then on the counter note of that, did you find that embracing kind of the more emo attire was enough to kind of pull them away from that stereotype that they were having of you initially?
It felt like it helped at least a little bit, but it still lingers upon me from time to time, even though I was trying really hard to seem like I'm different. I wanted to make sure that what I wanted to be seen is set in stone, that I was going to be more than just a living stereotype. I wanted to make sure that the friends that I make also abide to that kind of mindset too. But it wasn't easy because there were moments where it would take a toll on trying to be proud of where I came from because it my parents did take notice eventually that I was setting aside all of my cultural priorities that they wanted me to value growing up. And I wanted to make sure that, oh, I mean, yes, I'm part of the family, but I didn't want to fully embrace it because that would just mean, going back into that Asian American demeanor that was heavily criticized during high school.
Hmm.
So it was hard to find that balance, and it was hard to you know, c- um, develop that bond with my family, cultural wise.
Yeah. Did you experience any, like, when you started dressing differently or started, having the different friends that were in this group, did you receive any kickback from your parents at home or your siblings, where it's like, maybe they had like a moment where they sat you down and be like, Jarggy, we're concerned. Did you have it, or disappointed? Like, did you have any of that at home where these choices you were making to kind of feel more yourself were actually causing friction with your family that you felt really close or wanted to feel close to?
Oh, definitely. There was a time where they noticed that I was, wearing all black. I was putting on clothes that doesn't really match together. Like, I remember at the time, I thought it was cool to wear a waistcoat over like a graphic tee
Mm-hmm.
and like wear a tie that's basically inspired by early days of Avril Lavigne and a bunch of other pop punk bands. And they questioned it a lot because I was so used to the uniform look that I went through during private school. And there was even a time where I attempted to, grow out my hair out a little bit more, but I would get scolded and and they would tell me like, why do you want to look like a girl? I'm like, no, but it's, I don't know. It just felt like something that I wanted to do. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to, grow my hair out a little bit more. I wanted to do things that I typically wouldn't see a bunch of other uh, normies, for lack of a better term, that that they were doing. And it was hard because I would never was able to reach that level of that difference appearance wise
Mm-hmm.
that I would be more comfortable in. So I had to deal with the fact that I had to find some middle ground with how I look without telling my parents straight on that I'm trying to be more not like everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I do try to tell them that I don't want to be like anyone else, they would have to sit me down and remind me that it's important to blend in. Otherwise, you would get lost in the world. Otherwise, you would be considered as the outcast. That they wouldn't want to have anything to do with you if you were seen different. Which it's fair. Like, I agree with them to a large extent, but I didn't know at the time how to explain to them. Like, there are people who are different that are outside of the conventional of like American dream standards of living. And I was so desperate to find a way to explain that at the time that I wanted to express it through how I look, how I wanted to be perceived.
It sounds like your parents talked about, when it came to your long hair, not showing any kind of femininity. It sounds like they wanted you to be more masculine. But did you find yourself kind of questioning that a little bit or seeing yourself in a different light? I know that you were super close to your sister. You talked about when you were raised that you shared the same toys. So growing up, you probably had a decent amount of feminine exposure from the types of things that your sister had that were then passed along to you. So you're probably already familiar with a lot of this and was comfortable with it. But now you're getting a lot of this pushback that you're now outwardly showing, maybe wanting to have longer hair or maybe some style choices that might not be seen as typical or regular. Were you receiving kind of that push to be more gender normal in your appearance and your behavior? And how did that play out for you?
Oh, yeah, that was definitely the case. And even the fact that you brought up the fact that most of it was probably because I was raised or was monitored by my sisters growing up, and the fact that my father wasn't around to console me on certain things because he was always sleeping in his room after the graveyard shift. It does make sense where many of that came from. But to go back to the question of them pushing all these gender normative aspects onto me, like that was definitely the case. I didn't feel comfortable being perceived a lot more masculine, but I wasn't really motivated to question it because I had doubts that maybe it's just a phase. Maybe I'll grow out of it. That I would eventually push away a lot of this feminine demeanor that I would later adapt for further down the line. But the reason why I wouldn't question it is because I was conditioned to think that if I did, then there would be consequences, that I wouldn't be living life correctly if I wasn't being, like a cisgendered male, not just appearance wise, but personality wise. And it was a challenge for me because I had to deal with these doubts that were coming up to my head for throughout high school and even after that. And I came to the point where I'm like, yeah, I do have these like desires to like appear less masculine, but at the same time I didn't want to disappoint people, especially my parents. So I just had to learn to repress it for as long as I could.
Mm-hmm. So we've had a few people on. Typically, when we've talked about repressing, who we are or things that we want to do, lots of times there's the association of also poor mental health outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like because you weren't able to express yourself or do those things that you wanted to do that were kind of more true to yourself, that you felt maybe anxiety about things or self-hatred or shame about who you were, or just general depression over that circumstance?
Oh yeah, totally. It wasn't prominent before high school. I had other different things that I was depressed about, but now I had to worry about another thing in high school, which is, of course, discovering self-expression and the fear of the potential consequences of diving into this aspect even further. And it also brought up the same fear that I had growing up of the confrontation of my folks, of putting me down and like talking over me of things that they don't agree with, and just basically being angry of the fact that something wrong has happened and it's most likely because of me. So I was conditioned to think that whatever anything that goes wrong, like I have to deal with it, whether it's my fault or it isn't my fault.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
How do you deal with that? Because chances are some views of your parents can change over time. There's instances where parents become more accepting, but there's other instances where they don't. And, they have what they expect and you're not meeting that. And so it's a constant source of contention. And for you, that you've expressed, family is super important to not only your family, but also to yourself. How do you juggle self-expression of being who you want to be, what feels right for you, but dealing with the expectations that your family places on you? That's a very difficult act to juggle. How is there any, how do you do it? or is it still a source of difficulty?
To be honest, I don't exactly remember how I dealt with it specifically. All I could remember is just mostly just dealing with it and acting like it's not really a big deal at the end of the day. But as you mentioned, like how it's playing into what I am today, it's not as prominent as before because obviously I learned to accept that I am who I am. That especially considering that I just entered my early 30s, that I'm a lot more confident and a lot more like clear of what I am now than compared to like a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not really clear of how I was able to manage it throughout that time. It's mostly a blur that I just came to accept that I just lived with it. I didn't really have a lot of coping mechanisms of trying to combat the like the inner fears that I didn't want to show.
Mm-hmm. So, like, if your parents brought it up to you, did you just like, yeah, I understand, or did you like, well, this is me, it's who I want to be? So, like, sometimes we end up either like submitting to what they want, or at least giving them the feeling that we're submitting, and then planning not to change. Or sometimes I see like people more like standing their ground, being rebellious. Like, where did you kind of fall into that dynamic when it came to when there was confrontation about things like that at home?
It goes back and forth, mostly just me trying to brush it off, acting like it doesn't bother me at all. But I remember a time where I did feel a little bit more assertive of dealing with that and just telling them, "Hey, it's you just got to deal with it." But it would never turn out well at the end, so I stopped doing that.
So yeah, that's a difficult thing, and the only reason I bring it up is because there's a lot of people that still live with family, and that it can be a constant source of contention or arguments, or just dealing with that mental health that comes from not having the same viewpoint on that. And so that's kind of why I want to know, just so people realize, hey, maybe I'm not alone in
Yeah,
this
totally.
situation that I'm in.
Hmm.
But yeah, so you're kind of in high school, you're making these changes, you're showing more self-expression, getting a little bit of pushback here and there from family. Was there any other places where you felt that you were growing during this time? Not just through your self-expression, but in other ways?
I guess we're gonna go back to the whole upbringing of myself as a furry, because that was also another thing that I definitely faced throughout high school was my involvement within the furry fandom during that time. So as I was drawing my character, like for the 100th time, I discovered other outlets that I can share my art. At first, being DeviantArt, which I'm pretty sure a lot of artists can recall being one of their first outlets of sharing their art. And from there, I discovered other furry interests, as I would say, that I didn't realize I had before. Um, and from there, um, I remember times where I would steal my mother's work computer, whenever she isn't home. Um, when I would come home from high school, and just the first thing that I would do is open up my mom's work computer and just look up DeviantArt while playing like songs on YouTube. And from there, I realized there were other communities within the furry fandom that I could be a part of too. I looked at arts of like toony dragons or stories of one becoming a dragon, which, by the way, was one of the first interests that I had, was transformation,
Oh, cool.
becoming something that you desire to be, outside of what you wanted, what you were initially born to be. And from there, my interest was definitely becoming a dragon, which makes sense because I initially made a dragon character that's within the Spyro fandom.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, this is awesome. I would spend hours just looking up stories of characters becoming like the dragon that they were meant to be, and a bunch of other art that related to that would pop up on the DeviantArt homepage that I was going through in terms of that.
Side question, real quick.
Yeah.
American Dragon, the cartoon.
Yes.
Any any thoughts on that one?
Well, I'm pretty sure you know how I feel about that show, but it's definitely what triggered my interests initially.
So you had found a community that was, sharing similar interests to things that you had
Mhm.
already kind of really enjoyed, and you're discovering more about this. I'm sorry to cut you off on that, but I was making that
All good.
connection there.
Yeah, American Dragon. It's no surprise that I have an interest in that show for a specific reason. Let's just say. Ah, man, I gotta watch that show again. I wonder if it's on Disney Plus.
It was a good show.
It was a good show.
Mhm.
Well, until they changed art directions,
Yeah.
which we're not going to talk about that.
we don't bring that up.
No.
But yeah, so you're starting to kind of get into more furry circles during this period of kind of self-discovery. Where does that lead?
That led me to other things that I had interest in. I'll be blunt about it. I discovered that I like fat furs. I like macro furs. I like antics that you would see in of old cartoons, especially in Saturday morning Disney cartoons, where characters would face a scenario where they would be hit by a growth ray or eat something that would alter their size. And from that point on, in like scrolling through DeviantArt, I really did realize that I did have interest in those things that I didn't really fully understood when I was a child.
Mhm.
Like I knew as a child that I found those fascinating, but it wasn't until like around high school that blew my mind that there are people within that community that shared that same revelations as well. And it was cool. Like it was comforting knowing that I wasn't the only one that found it very weird that I did had like an affinity of that kind of those kind of scenarios in
Mhm.
old cartoons that we grew up with.
So not to make it awkward for you, but this is interesting for me. So what you're saying is you had this affinity towards these topics before you encountered them
Hmm.
online.
Yeah.
And so it was just something about yourself that even before like you discovered other people that had similar interests and affinities that you're like, this is weird. I like this, but then you discover that there's people online that share that. Then is that so that sequence of operations is kind of interesting to me, that it wasn't the fact that you were introduced to it online. It was just something that you already had innate that had occurred and that had developed, that then you found the community online that shared the same.
It's definitely weird, like as you're mentioning it, but yeah, it did feel like I didn't really understood it until it actually happened. In terms of finding other people that are within that same circle.
Mm-hmm. How does that make you feel? So, and I ask this because I understand it, so don't
Mhm.
feel on the spot. But so you're growing up and you have these instances where, okay, your friends and who everybody's telling you that you should have an interest in or you should have affinity in, like girls, right? Everybody's always warning you one day you're going to really like girls and you need to be careful. And you probably growing up, and from what I understand, you didn't ever have that affinity towards the typical, but instead you're feeling these feelings towards things that are just almost amorphous for most people, but for you, they're like, oh. Does that make you feel any guilt, though? Does that make you feel strange or weird without knowing that other people are the same? Like, walk me through if you remember any of like those feelings as you're discovering this, but without having found that group first.
I felt it was weird. I'm not gonna lie. Mainly because I didn't have like attraction to actual people outside of the whole furry thing. And I kept telling myself, like, it'll fall into place eventually in terms of what I like outside of the furry thing. But spoiler alert, it didn't really go far. I definitely wasn't finding an interest in being with a guy. And in terms of girls, like I would just say, I think she is okay. I can see myself being in a relationship with that person, but it never went beyond that. It never went like long term thoughts of being with somebody. Like, don't get me wrong, I still have capabilities of feeling romantic attractions, but in putting myself at the time, I really wanted to be involved in like this kind of attraction because I noticed that everyone else is doing it too. I noticed that many people within my classmates that they're already finding relationships amongst each other, and I'm like, I want to be part of that too. It looks fun.
Mm-hmm.
I want to find someone to be like, hey, want to go to prom? Hey, want to hang out? Hey, want to smoochy smooch?
Mm-hmm.
And it never got to that point. I never actually dated anybody during my time in grade school. I never actually went to prom. I never actually, got the chance to be upfront with someone that I had a crush with at the time to be like, I like you. Want to go out? No, it never came to that point.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I probably, if I could, I probably would do anything to be like that was the case, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. My point being, I did had attractions, like I did have romantic attractions, but it never developed outside of that or beyond that, I should say.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm gathering is, you would see people together, you would
Mm-hmm.
be, jealous of like these couples together, and generally just the sense of the romantic relationship is what you were wanting, that companionship, giving flowers, holding hands. Maybe not so much, from what I'm gathering, like the actual sexual attraction to another person, because you said that you've never really felt that towards girls or guys per se, but just the actual romantic part of it, companionship, showing that you care, stuff like that is something that you craved, but just never really had the opportunity to explore during your high school years.
It was definitely something I craved a lot. Um, Not just for looks, but I really did want it to feel that sort of connection that I've seen other people go through. Um, maybe it maybe it was sexual for them. Like I know people do discover like what they're into or who they're into in that early of an age, but I never really thought of it at the time because I just considered like the whole sexual thing just, you know, it's something that only perverts go through, as I should say. That I didn't really want it to be seen as someone who thinks about that on a daily basis, because I never actually did have an interest in that, as I'll later figure out. But going back to the whole romantic attraction thing, um, at first it was mostly towards all of the girls that I've seen, um, but there are like one or two guys during high school that I'd be like, they're really nice. But is it wrong for me to say that I kind of want to, get to know them more beyond the whole friendship thing? But of course, I didn't really consider it because of, what I what I was taught to believe in terms of, the whole social norms of being with somebody.
Yeah. Did those feel differently than maybe some of the women that you were interested romantically in? What was it? Was it just the difference was that you socially you knew that you couldn't, or were you actually maybe more drawn to them but just didn't because of that social interaction looking back?
The biggest factor I would say is definitely the social factor of it all. I was really pressured into keeping up with appearances that I didn't want it to be presented as, gay, I guess, or outside of the whole male energy, because I was afraid. It's as simple as that. Like, maybe that was the biggest drive on me finding a romantic partner in girls. But I really, looking back, I probably would have gone even farther when I did commit to finding out my potential, companionship if it was a guy. And I probably would even potentially be like, I wanna take this even further. See where it goes.
Looking back in high school, you never, even with girls or guys, you never made that leap to go and ask or pursue. Have you? And I think that's something that is common, like asking somebody on even a date can be terrifying. Absolutely terrifying.
Totally.
Have you done anything, or has it gotten better where now you feel like maybe it's not quite as scary, or you've learned that it's something that you can do, or is it still just as scary as it was back then?
It's still just as scary. However, the major difference is I actually did had the confidence to actually say it right in front of the person, which is something that I would never imagine that I would ever do at the time. It didn't go out. It didn't turn out the way that I wanted to. Personally, because um, it's it's something that I wish I probably could do at the time, just be upfront with it. But even now, like, I was able to be upfront with like one or two people that I knew for years, but unfortunately, it didn't really turn out the way that I expected. But even then, I can kind of be thankful at the fact that I did evolve to be a lot more confident, to be more upfront to whoever I had these feelings with.
Oh, good. And yeah,
Yeah,
like it's not. It is always scary, but you never really know until you put it out there, right? And so
right.
even though it maybe didn't turn out the way you had hoped, at least you gave it that opportunity to have that happen. So I'm that's awesome. I'm proud of you for doing that because I know how terrifying that is.
Totally.
Well, cool. So it sounds like we've covered high school pretty good. I do want to get one more topic that you touched on briefly, and that's, I think, is super relatable. That it sounds like there was really only one computer at home, and it was your mom's computer that you would
Yeah.
sneak onto while she was at work.
Oh yeah.
Do you have any stories or anything like about that? Because I think that's relatable for a lot of people growing up, where it's like, okay, I got to time this right to where I can do and like make sure that I'm not like explain that, explain that scenario.
Okay, so I had to remember the time that I had coming home from school and when my mother would return from her day job. It was about like 1 or 2 hours, give or take, that I would find my mom's laptop and just briefly browse DeviantArt for a bunch of art that wasn't necessarily lewd, but it was definitely fetishy. It was definitely a kink driven that I was like, I don't know why I'm into it, but I'm into it. And it's definitely something that I would not want my mother to see on the browsing history, but here I am. So I would go through that and I would make sure that I wouldn't be exposing the online history right before my mom would use it for work purposes. So what I would do is that I would sit right in front of the window that showed the front yard. That way, I can definitely tell when one of my folks would be coming home, and that would give me time to close everything out to make sure that nothing is left seen that I don't want them to see. And it's from there, I just put it back as if nothing happened.
Were there any particular like videos or things you remember watching that maybe were memorable? I think when we were talking earlier, you mentioned like fursuit dancing was probably something that you were embarrassed about to have seen, but you really it pushed you kind of towards a direction that you didn't foresee initially.
Yeah, it was a definitely a YouTube video of dancing furries. I remember back in the early days of the fandom where it was a lot more common to make video content based off of wearing fursuits and even making skits out of it. And it was fun because most of that content was dance oriented, and it's just so fascinating to look at someone perform to that extent within a fursuit. And I would consider myself like mildly part of the fandom at the time because I was still like learning more about the fandom as I was looking at these videos. But I remember this one YouTube video of a bunch of fursuiters like dancing on top of the rooftop of Anthrocon.
Hmm.
And it was, if I remember correctly, it was a character that resembled like the Monster Energy drink. And it was a kangaroo fursuiter. And it was cool because he had these smooth moves that I would never perform in or out of fursuit. And I would just look up even more videos that were similar in that vein. And later down the line, I'd be like, I kind of want that. I kind of want to, talk to someone who does perform within Fursuit, who does do all this furry content, like outside of their everyday mundane lives. And I think that was the moment where I really did want it to become like a furry in terms of how I label myself because I accepted it. I wanted to look at what furries are capable of, and not just like in the art um, perspective, and not just like in the fact that they have an interest in anthropomorphic creatures. Like there's so much more that I wanted to learn that what furries are capable of. And all thanks to this fursuit dance video that I think for.
Oh, cool. And slowly pointing you towards the direction that kangaroos are superior to dragons, it sounds like.
Maybe.
So you still live with your parents. Have you
Mhm.
successfully evaded their detection on these kinds of things, or was there ever that moment where they discovered it?
They discovered the fursuiting aspect, but not like to the part where that it's considered a furry thing. I just told them that I developed a hobby of crafting my own costume. That it's just like a cosplay thing that is considered just like a hobby. And I do tell them, I do let them know that I'll be going to conventions. I do tell them that I do go out of town to meet up with people with like an interest in those cartoon characters, but I never explicitly told them that I was a furry.
Mm-hmm.
I never really shown that most of my like art endeavors revolve around the fandom. That I tell them that I just have an interest in cartoons. I just have an interest in making or developing animated content
Mm-hmm.
that shows throughout my illustrations. And I wanted to, you know, I wanted to meet people within the same interests, but never really express the fact that I am a furry explicitly to them, which I think I was successful of doing so at this point. I never really had to explain all the nuances of what it is to be a furry. I never had to explain all the controversies that we cannot really escape from, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
But they know that I have a fursuit. They know that I wear from time to time just out of fun, which of course it is out of fun, but not like just to perform it at conventions.
Mm-hmm.
That I don't think they know.
Well, and you created that from scratch, correct? Your fursuit?
Yeah.
That's super impressive because that's a lot of work and a lot of talent that goes into that. So,
Yeah, it's not it's not perfect. Of course, many other people would say that to their craft, but I remember my very first fursuit. The head base was actually made by a former friend of mine that I once went to a convention with for the very first time. Because that was the very first time that I went to a physical convention that revolved around like people going to furry meetups and going to talk to people art wise. And it wasn't easy trying to convince my parents to go there because growing up, of course, I was very sheltered. I didn't really have the courage to actually go out of town on my own. That I had to explain who I'm going with, where this location is, make sure that they have that my parents have the phone numbers of my friends. They had to make sure that they do a background check with people I associate with. And well, I managed to dodge around that. Well, I wouldn't say dodge, but like confront it.
mhm.
But I later had to come up with an excuse that oh we're just gonna go out of town. We're going to do some sightseeing. We're gonna go to an area that's close within the San Francisco area, which is further confusion, by the way.
Mhm.
I told them that we're gonna be staying at a hotel. Like we're not gonna, go out, do drugs. We're not gonna like associate with a bunch of gang members. We're not gonna go to, you know, late night clubs or and whatnot. I'm not gonna do drugs. Like I had to, I had to let them know that I'm not that kind of person that would just, be impulsive about doing crazy things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was back in like 2017, 2018 that I went to my very first prairie convention, which is Further Confusion.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and afterwards, it was until one of my roommates was like, hey, want a fursuit? I can help you make one. I'm like, okay, but of course I have to pitch in with supplying, the materials and the stuff required to make one.
Mm-hmm.
I had to go to this strip in LA where they sell like fabrics and textiles.
Oh, is that the famous? They've got like a strip where all these different fabrics and style things get imported from all over the world, and they just sell them at this. I have friends that do cosplay, and they've told me stories
Yeah.
of this area where they just go and get everything.
Yeah, I believe that's the same area actually, because if you if you're diligent enough, you can actually negotiate a fair price with these people. And most of them are nice. Most of them were just like, you know what, forget it. So I just moved on to another store that thankfully had the fabrics that I was looking for. And afterwards, we would go back to our city. We would spend like each weekend, further developing what my first suit would want to look like. And they would ask me like, do you want it toony? Do you want it realistic? Do you want to have it, like all that jazz? And um, I had to do all the sewing. I had to do all of the like pattern cutouts of the head, and I think with a lot of trial and error, I was able to pull it off. But it wasn't perfect, but it was something that I would consider my own
Oh, cool.
as a fursuit. Yeah.
And it looks or at least I've seen 2.0, and 2.0 looks amazing. So,
Yes. Thankfully, I learned a lot before 2.0. So,
so with the time we have left in this, let's kind of move out of high school and focus a lot on just your personal discovery.
mhm.
Where did that kind of end up? Where do you sit now when it comes to how you feel about yourself, um, how you show yourself to others? Just walk us through kind of where you've ended up and how you got there.
I'm definitely a lot more happier than I was before. The whole process was basically just discovering that I have to, I just have to talk to people because you'll never know what they might offer. Like, you'll never know what kind of connections that you'll develop, like within the people that you decide to just say hi. Like, just a simple act of, saying hi, what's up. You'll never know where that will take you.
Mhm.
And it definitely took me to a point where I am now. Like, I would never imagine that I would have my own like source of output within the furry fandom. I would never have thought of, gaining a like a community within the furry fandom, like such as I definitely discovered that I can make some sort of income through art commissions. I definitely learned to go through conventions, like having my own space in the dealer's den. And eventually, I was able to find this group that I am a part of. And you probably know this. It's a small group called Furality.
Yeah, and we'll definitely touch on that and kind of that role that it's had probably in the next episode. But
Yeah.
it sounds like through furry and meeting different people and how different people live and just kind of having a greater exposure to
hmm
areas that you resonate with, that you've been able to better kind of find yourself and who you are. Is that kind of what I'm getting from what you said?
Pretty much, yeah.
That's awesome. Any we talked about kind of how relationship wise you kind of find that you're more on the romantic end of things. We talked a little bit about when it came to just your dress and appearance. You were kind of starting to just experiment with your hair, kind of going against some of these gender norms. Is there anything that you want to talk about, just where you ended up there when it comes to gender, and then also just your general orientation, and how maybe furry kind of
So,
led you through those stages?
well, before we get into that, I should probably mention earlier that I discovered that I was on the asexual side, that it made sense that I didn't really have a lot of sexual or attraction that that I thought was valid, that I didn't really see myself, just having these kind of connections that's outside of the romantic side. And in terms of like gender identity, I didn't really feel like that I was a part of the gender binary in terms of not just how I look, but how I feel on the inside. Like, it made sense that I didn't really abide to all of these cisgendered male expectations. Neither did I really feel like that I was committed to finding myself as perceived as like a woman. I would say, like, even though I did had these feminine sort of outputs with my appearance,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I later found out that I really did feel like I was non-binary. I didn't really feel pressured to put myself within some sort of gender box that would kind of dictate how I wanted to be perceived, and I definitely felt like a lot of weight just lifted off of my shoulders because of that.
Oh, cool. Do you want to
Yeah.
go, and for those that might be not be familiar, what is non-binary, or what is non-binary to you? And then how does that how does that show in your life, and what kind of um how does that make you feel? How does that benefit you, coming to a recognition that that's kind of where you fall?
So to briefly define what it is to be non-binary in the dictionary sense, it's basically you do not identify within the gender binary of male and female. Like, you don't really identify with many of the ideas of what it is to be male or female per se. And personally, to me, it's just all about you know um, finding your authentic self that doesn't necessarily have to be defined as either male or female.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that's the case with a lot of people who are non-binary, but I'm pretty sure they also have their reasons why they wouldn't be perceived within the male and female identity.
Is that difficult? Because society pushes those very hard, and until you
Yeah.
actually pull yourself back to look at it, you don't really realize that that's just baked in to so many different things in our society, right? We have pronouns that are gendered, we have dress that's gendered, behavior that is gendered. Is it difficult to find that middle? And is it difficult for people to understand that, when you're trying to explain it to a normal person?
It's definitely hard because even myself, like, it's hard to perceive someone who does identify as non-binary because we are so conditioned to label like the clothings that we wear or the things that we do within the gender spectrum. And it's definitely hard to if you it's definitely hard to be perceived to be non-binary, like outside of the things that I wear or the things that I do, because it's I didn't want it to be such a stickler about it. Like, I didn't want to constantly remind people that, I mean, I'm non-binary. I didn't want to, go out there and constantly remind people like verbally, because that's just not what anyone would want to do generally. And so it can be difficult to find that middle ground, but at the same time, I just learned to not get so riled up when people do think that if people do like label me with he him pronouns or even she her pronouns at times. So I just learned with the fact that we're not at the point where it's easily done to identify someone's non-binary demeanor. But
that said, though, does it make a difference to you when somebody takes the effort to try to find out what your pronouns are, what you prefer, and then even though they might make a mistake here or there, but they're actively trying to address you in a way that's respectful to you? How does that, when somebody actually puts forth the effort to try to meet you where you're at, how does that make you feel?
it does make me feel good about myself, because of course it shows that they care. And coming back to the fact that they will use pronouns that I don't identify with, like, I'm personally not going to get offended by it as long as it's not done out of spite. Like, if you're doing it out of spite, then obviously they're on my turf of I'm going to come after them. Yeah, but no, I usually just try to be chill about it. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to be the type that polices other people's habits, because if it does come from a good place, then that's good enough for me. Like, if I do see them take the time to, like, correct themselves, or to, like, kind of constantly remind themselves that what they do call me matters to me, and that's that's a lot. That itself is already a lot for me, and that's pretty much all I can ask for from them.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And then we talked about gender, but then attraction. You said that you find yourself in the ace category, but you've also talked about how there's still romantic attraction. Now, past high school, you were trying to figure that out, and you've had time since you've gone through college and career
Mhm.
work, and so some time has passed. But where do you find yourself now? Is it purely just asexual? Is there any of that romantic that's still there? As you've had kind of more time to learn about yourself, where do you see yourself?
So from this point on, I do see myself as a gray ace, and to briefly describe what that means is that for anyone who is gray ace, they don't really identify. Actually, they identify as asexual, but they don't really fit into the main type of asexuality, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are moments where I'm like, yeah, I hit it. But it's weirdly enough, it's not really with like a real life person per se.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's of course within the furry realm. Like, um, it's hard to describe like that kind of sexual interest. To put it mildly, in terms of within the furry fandom, but it does make sense that I would call myself like a gray ace, because I never was actually committed to that whole sexual attraction thing in real life, even though there's a nuanced way of describing how I actually did feel that in terms of like the whole furry character aspect of it. So it's even up to today, it's hard to describe it thoroughly, but
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm asexual through and through, and I am proud to say that I solely rely on the romantic aspect of relationships than the sexual side.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
And not to push too far, and if it is too far, just let me know and we'll call it at that. But
that's fine.
you talked about how within the furry realm, in fantasy, that there is kind of, you do have that attraction at times.
Hmm.
Is there any aspects in which that fantasy can be pushed into reality given that context with another person? And I know that that's very ambiguous, but is that something that you could ever see, or is that something that you're still learning or experimenting with, where maybe there could be some aspect to the furry fantasy that is able to then be carried over with somebody that you're romantically attracted to and with?
I'm confident to say that it would probably never like go into real life.
Mm-hmm.
Because oh, I should mention this. At one point I did consider myself like to be gay because I later found out that I'm open to the fact that I could be with another guy. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'm gay, but I didn't really, thought about getting on with them,
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't until like around 2019, like I was at BLFC, and
Which is a furry convention, if nobody
yeah,
understands.
it's a furry convention within Reno, Nevada,
Mm-hmm.
and I was put within conversations of like the whole sexual talk, and I would just play it cool and be like, yeah, of course, it's cool if you're into that and all and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
but I later then realized that I could never see myself actually partaking in that into that in real life. That I would never actually commit, even though I would jokingly say like, yeah, it's. I would definitely go in for it, but no, it's who am I kidding? Of course, I wouldn't. I even within the people that I'm super close with, like I would never feel comfortable in and doing that kind of act of sexual intercourse.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that I came to terms with not too long after BLFC.
Oh, cool.
So it's from there, like I like later discovered that there are people who do have like that casual like romantic attraction regardless of their gender, but there is like that element of like sexual attraction that they just don't really see themselves in, and of course that's asexuality.
Mm-hmm.
And i'm I'm really happy that I was able to find that kind of a community that shares that same sentiment about being in a relationship.
Yeah. Have
Yeah.
you talked about, coming to terms with it? When
Hmm.
you came to terms with it, um, there's coming to terms as in like accepting it, and then there's coming to in terms in regards to this is me, and it's hella awesome. Which one did you find yourself at? Have you found yourself a little bit more? Because I know like there's different stages lots of times of this where as we're figuring ourselves out, we're like, yes, this is me. I I accept it, but I'm not thrilled. But then there's also the yes, this is me, and I'm so happy. Like this is perfect for me. I love who I am. Like, where did you find yourself on that acceptance spectrum, or has that evolved or changed at all?
I was definitely was like, yes, this is me. This is who I am. This is without a doubt. the most integral part of who I am. However, I was very cautious about it, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Because you'll never know, because like anything can happen. And I was that type of person that was afraid of commitment because of knowing that things can happen from then till now. But overall, I was considered one of those people that fully embraced it once they realized it. And it still rings true up to this day.
Oh, good. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that that's so healthy. Like to go from that state of, not knowing to then
Mhm.
knowing, but then not just accepting, but embracing and loving yourself for that, when that can be challenging. Because again, we've talked about how society can be so contrary to who we are, but then to find ourselves and be like, I'm happier for it because it's freaking awesome.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you kind of feel like you've gotten to that point. So with that, why don't we call this an episode? We'll go
All right.
into career, art, college. There's still a lot to talk about in the next episode. But super, this one, Jarggy, you're amazing. You're absolutely amazing. So thank you for
Oh,
being
stop.
here. With that, we'll call it an episode. Thanks everybody for watching. Again, like and subscribe if you've enjoyed what you've watched, and we'll see you for the next episode with the amazing Jarggy. Thanks again, Jarggy.
Thank you for hosting.
Yeah. We'll see you, everybody.
Yeah. Bye.
My hand waves so weird because of these trackers.
Yeah, I just like, go back and forth like this. It looks so awkward, but that's just what I do.
I should adapt it. I like it.
Mm-hmm.